So select the option for lower, then move the tweak menu to one side. To see the time on screen, we'll need another number displayer to one side. But there's no need to set up a new one. Just clone the one we made earlier. To see the time on screen, that way the appearance will match.
Switch, fucking Mixer, and YouTube are playing all at the same time. I hate when it fucking resets and does that.
Score to the number displayer input.
Fuck me.
Just like we did before. In the Score Tweak menu, create a wire from the current score output port. Connect the wire to the number.
Don't come in as a new person asking for people to do stuff when you're nobody in the community.
Once that's hooked up, you can close the Tweak menu of the score and open up the Tweak menu for the cloned number displayer. As this number displayer is showing time, we need to tweak it slightly.
Don't come into people's stream asking them to do something they're not doing.
To display time.
If I wanted to do that, I'd be doing that.
The option Show Milliseconds is now selectable. Having a score has really upped the game's replayability. But collecting objects isn't the only way to use a score. Stamp it down underneath the first. Just like with the first score gadget, we also want to post the score at the finish line. So connect the detected output of the finish line to the post score input. As this is going to record time, we also need to tweak the default scoreboard settings. They can be found on the second page of the menu. First, change the score unit to time. We also need to change the scoreboard order. When ranking times, the lowest scores should be at the top. So select the option for lower, then move the tweak menu to one side. To see the time on screen, we'll need another number displayer. But there's no need to set up a new one from scratch. Just clone the one we made earlier. That way the appearance will match. Clone the number displayer with L1 and R2. Place it next to the time score gadget. To display time, we need to connect the current score to the number displayer input, just like we did before. In the Score Tweak menu, create a wire from the current score output port. Connect the wire to the number range input on the number displayer. Once that's hooked up, you can close the tweak menu of the score and open up the tweak menu for the cloned number displayer. As this number displayer is showing time, we need to tweak it slightly. In display format, select the clock icon to display time. The option Show Milliseconds is now selectable. Turn it on to make the time display even more precise. Use the options on the alignment page of the tweak menu to set the position of the number displayer. Select the score number displayer with X if you want to preview them on screen together. The collectible count is in the middle, so how about at the top, on the right? Select the score number displayer with X if you want to preview them on screen together. Looks good. In the next step, we'll create some logic to record the time, we can use a timer. Go to the assembly menu, then select Gadgets. Close Gameplay Gear, then open Logic and Processing. The icon for the timer is a clock. Stamp it on the microchip canvas to the right of the start line trigger zone. Leave a bit of space, as we'll also need to add a counter. This will turn the signal from the trigger zone into a constant signal, so it stays on even after Connie has left the trigger zone's detection area. The counter also lives in the Logic and Processing menu. Select it with X and stamp one between the start line and the timer. If you've played our wiring and logic tutorial, you might already know how to connect up the timer and the counter. But here's a reminder in case you've forgotten. Start by creating a wire from the start line trigger zone's detected port. Connect it to the increase count input of the counter. When Connie crosses the start line, the counter will increase and the counter full port will send a constant signal. The counter full output then connects to the start timer input. This simple bit of logic ensures that the timer will keep on ticking until we tell it to stop. In the next step, we'll tweak the timer. The counter full output then connects to the start timer input. This simple bit of logic ensures that the timer will keep on ticking until we tell it to stop. In the next step, we'll tweak the timer. Let's take a look at the timer's tweak menu. Open it up with L1 and square. The timer requires a target time. Let's take a look at the timer's tweak menu. Open it up with L1 and square. The timer requires a target time, but we don't want a time limit to complete the scene, so set the target time high enough that the player won't ever reach it. As the platforms disappear after a few seconds, it's impossible for Connie to survive forever. So 120 seconds should be enough time to complete the course. Below the sliders is the timer type. Right now it's set to count up. With this setting selected, the timer will keep counting until it reaches the target time, or until it's turned off. That's no good for recording a fastest time, so change the timer type to the speed setting. Its icon is a curved line.
A banana.
With the speed setting selected, the timer will only count while it's receiving an input signal. This makes it work like a stopwatch and will allow us to record a finish time with it. The timer is all set. Phew, almost there. Who thought logic could be so demanding? Now we just need to record the time as a score. We'll do that in the next step. To record the finish time, we need another score modifier. Go to the assembly menu, select Gadgets, then Gameplay Gear. Grab a score modifier and stamp one to the right of the timer. Press circle to unequip the gadget, then open the score modifier tweak menu with L1 and square. In the score name box, select the score you created to record time. Hover over the box and use the up and down directional buttons to scroll through the different scores in the scene. There should only be 2 to choose from. To record the time with the score modifier, we need the timer's tweak menu, so open it up if it isn't already. In the tweak menu, create a wire from the output of the current time slider. Extend the wire over to the score modifier tweak menu, then connect it to the input of the operation value. Now the operation value will be set by the current time of the timer. This time the operation type can be left as set, as we don't need to add the current time to anything. But the update type should be changed to continuously while powered. This means the score modifier will continuously update the score with the current time. Let's test it quickly in play mode. Remember we hooked up a text displayer to the time score. So now that the time score is being modified, we can see it on screen. The only problem is that the time doesn't stop when Connie crosses the finish. So we'll fix that in the final step. The last thing to do is to stop the timer when Connie crosses the finish line. Create a wire from the finish line trigger zone's detected port. Connect it to the reset count input port of the counter gadget. Resetting the counter will stop the signal to the timer. As we set the timer type to the speed setting, stopping the signal will cause the timer to stop counting. I think we're ready to play it. Switch over to play mode and have a go. If the timer doesn't stop when you cross the line, you probably need to set the timer type to speed. If you think it's a bit too easy, you could animate the platforms with action recorders to make it trickier. Or you could make some bubbles that are harder to collect, then set the score modifiers on those bubbles to award more points.
That was pretty cool.
Have
That's
a few
hard.
goes and see how fast you can collect all the prize bubbles. To finish the tutorial, just select Exit Creation in the Options menu. Here we are, deep in the logic department of the Dreams workshop. I've been conducting some experiments with selectors and exclusive gates. Cuthbert can never make his mind up, so learning these should help. Oh, Cuthbert, what a mess. This is an advanced tutorial, so I hope you've already learned the basics of creating logic. Selectors and exclusive gates are used for choosing different options in logic. The simpler of the two is the selector, so we'll look at that first. In front of Connie is a rotatable bridge, alongside a button that opens the door on the next platform. These arrows are grabbable by the imp. We'll use them to control the selector. Open up the microchip next to Connie. Wow, that's a lot of gadgets. But if we take a closer look, it's actually quite simple. There's 3 grab sensors on the left. We can tell by the hand icon. The grab sensors detect when the arrow buttons are grabbed by the imp. If you hover over them, you'll be able to see which button they control. On the right, there's 4 keyframes that store the rotational position of the bridge. Try selecting them and you'll see what I mean. If you select more than one at a time, their effects will average out. You can use the circle button to deselect. To connect the 3 grab sensors to the 4 positional keyframes, we're going to use a selector. In the assembly menu, select Gadgets, then open Logic and Processing. Find the selector, then select it with X. Stamp one in the center of the microchip canvas, between the grab sensors to the left and the position keyframes to the right. Then unequip the gadget with Circle. In the next step, we'll set up the selector. Right, let's focus on the selector. The selector uses input signals to switch between different outputs. Open its tweak menu with L1 and square. The slider sets the number of options the selector can choose from. There are 4 positions for the bridge, so increase the slider to 4. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. The selector is much bigger now with lots more ports. On the right edge of the selector, there's 4 output ports. Create wires on the output ports with R2 or X and connect a keyframe to each one. Make sure you keep the keyframes in order. Now we have 4 outcomes for the selector to choose from. But how do we switch between them? On the bottom left of the selector, you'll find 2 input ports that don't have a letter icon. They are Move to Next output and Move to Previous output. These inputs will make the selector switch between the connected keyframes in sequence. We just need to connect them to the grab sensors for the arrow buttons. Create a wire from the grabbed output of the grab sensor that controls the right arrow. Connect it to the selector's input port for Move to Next output. If you're getting confused by all these inputs and outputs, just remember, left side of the gadget is inputs, right side is outputs. Now do the same for the left arrow grab sensor and the Move to Previous output port. We still need to connect the up arrow's grab sensor. Why don't we use it to reset the bridge? You can directly select outputs by connecting to the corresponding input. Create a wire from the grabbed output of the up arrow grab sensor. Then connect it directly to the A input on the selector. This means that if you grab the up arrow, it will return the bridge to point at the door, regardless of its current position. Now switch over to play mode to try out the controls. Use the arrow buttons to rotate the bridge so Connie can reach the button. Don't try and rotate the bridge with Connie on it, though. She's only safe when she's on the blue circle in the middle. Once the door is open and she's back on the blue circle, grab the up arrow button to return the bridge back to its starting position.
Oh.
When Connie is across the bridge, return to edit mode and start the next step.
Interesting. There will be certain games where you got to use your imp to play.
The next obstacle looks complicated, but is really just a glamorous randomizer. There are 3 trapdoors for Connie to get across. Above each trapdoor is a microchip containing some simple logic. Open up all 3 with L1 and X. Now click R3 to play time. Notice how the trigger zones detect the balls and open the trapdoors. It looks hectic. It'll be very difficult to get Connie across, if not impossible. Give it a try in play mode if you want to, but whether you manage to cross or not, it's clearly too difficult. By adding some exclusive gates to the logic, we can make this obstacle a bit fairer while still being challenging. Exclusive gate gadgets just take a signal and pass it on. But when you have more than one exclusive gate in a scene, only one of them can be active at a time. So if we add exclusive gates to the trapdoors, then only one trapdoor can be open at a time. Which means that Connie will always have a chance of getting across. Pause the scene with R3, doors, then only when you have more than one exclusive gate in a scene, only one of them can be active at a time. So if we add exclusive gates to the trapdoors, then only one trapdoor can be open at a time. Which means that Connie will always have a chance of getting across. Pause the scene with R3 and make sure all 3 trapdoor microchips are open. Then head into the assembly menu. The exclusive gate gadget is found in the Logic and Processing menu. Its icon looks like a garden gate. Select it with X. Stamp an exclusive gate into each of the microchips between the trigger zone and the other gadgets. Unequip your imp with circle, then delete all the wires coming from the 3 trigger zones. In the next step, we'll connect the exclusive gates to the logic. Let's take a closer look at the ports on the exclusive gate. There's a gate input and a gate output port. These ports simply pass through a signal without changing it, but only if the gate is open, and only one gate can be open at a time. Connect the detected port of the trigger zone to the gate input port of the exclusive gate. The trapdoor has 2 possible positions. Open and closed, which is set by the 2 keyframes. But the closed door keyframe is connected via a NOT gate. NOT gates are shifty little gadgets. They do the opposite of what most gadgets do, because they're active when they're not receiving a signal.
What up, Mad
So
Sounds?
when there is not a signal from the exclusive gate, the closed door keyframe gets activated. So to complete the logic, connect wires from the gate output port and plug them into the open door keyframe and the NOT gate. When the exclusive gate is sending a signal, the open door keyframe becomes active, and when it is not sending a signal, the closed door keyframe is active. Now connect up the exclusive gate the same way as in the other two microchips. Each exclusive gate will open only if no other gates are open already. This will stop more than one trapdoor opening at once. Click R3 to start time and see how the exclusive gates work.
I'm gonna have to listen to this one again because I'm not quite understanding.
Let's take a closer look at the ports on the exclusive
Like,
gate.
I get how to wire it, but I'm not understanding why we're wiring
There's a gate input and a gate output port. These ports simply pass through a signal without changing it, but only if the gate is open, and only one gate can be open at a time. Connect the detected port of the trigger zone to the gate input port of the exclusive gate. The trapdoor has two possible positions, open and closed, which is set by the two keyframes. But the closed door keyframe is connected via a NOT gate. NOT gates are shifty little gadgets. They do the opposite of what most gadgets do, because they're active when they're not receiving a signal. So when there is not a signal from the exclusive gate, the closed door keyframe gets activated. So to complete the logic, connect wires from the gate output port and plug them into the open door keyframe and the NOT gate. When the exclusive gate is sending a signal, the open door keyframe becomes active, and when it is not sending a signal, the closed door keyframe is active. Now connect up the exclusive gate the same way
now
as
that
in
makes
the other
sense.
two microchips. Each exclusive gate will open only
Yeah,
if no
see,
other
I
gates
would,
are open
and then
already.
it forces the one to shut. So, like, no matter
This
what,
will stop
it has
more
to
than
do with the
one
NOT gate. I
trapdoor
missed the
opening at
stuff with the
once.
NOT gate. That's why I was confused.
Click R3 to start time and see how the exclusive gates work.
Yeah,
That
no,
should make
I
things a
don't.
bit easier for you to get Connie across to the next platform. Try it out in play mode.
Yeah, that'd be kind of.
Once Connie is across, return to edit mode and start the next step.
Oh, and I still messed it up. Whee! I just got catapulted up. Boop.
In the previous challenge, the exclusive gates were fairly simple. But did you know that you can give exclusive gates priorities? Exclusive gates with a higher priority will override ones with a lower priority.
There you go. That's how it
This
works.
makes
That's
the
how they
exclusive
distinguish
gate
each
work
other.
like a more sophisticated selector. We're going to use exclusive gates to make a timing mechanic to lower the final bridge. Above the meter, there's a microchip. Open it up and we'll take a look at what's going on. Notice that the logic branches from the trigger zone to two different outcomes. One branch goes to a timeline, the other to a keyframe. Take a look at the timeline first. Open up the timeline canvas with L1 and X. On the top two rows of the timeline, there are keyframes that animate the meter. Select them with X to preview them. The meter is just a timing guide for the player. When the button lights up, it's time to hit square. On the bottom row, there's a keyframe to keep the bridge upright. It ends just before the square button keyframe activates. If you take a look at the controller sensor, you'll see the square button output is connected to another keyframe. This keyframe lowers the bridge, allowing Connie to cross. So to lower the bridge, you have to switch from the timeline to the bridge down keyframe. But there's a problem. Both branches of the logic go through an exclusive gate. Open up the gate's tweak menus and take a look at their priorities. The gate to the timeline has a higher priority than the gate that lowers the bridge. This means that no matter what, it will override the exclusive gate that's attached to the controller sensor and the keyframe.
Wait, mine's...
To
Wait,
lower the bridge,
no,
we
mine's
need
not
to change the
opening. Hold
priority.
on. Oh, shit.
The timeline's exclusive gate has a higher priority than the one connected to the bridge down keyframe. The timeline's to look time on the top you view them square. On the bottom row, there's a keyframe to keep the bridge upright. It ends just before the square button keyframe activates. If you take a look at the controller sensor, you'll see the square button output is connected to another keyframe. This keyframe lowers the bridge, allowing Connie to cross. So to lower the bridge, you have to switch from the timeline to the bridge down keyframe. But there's a problem. Both branches of the logic go through an exclusive gate. Open up the gate's tweak menus and take a look at their priorities. The gate to the timeline has a higher priority than the gate that lowers the bridge. This means that no matter what, it will override the exclusive gate that's attached to the controller sensor and the keyframe. To lower the bridge, we need to change the priority of the second exclusive gate, but only when the player hits square with the right timing. We'll do all this with one keyframe. When you're ready, move on to the next step.
Oh, you're a bitch. But I get it. This is like
The
a really...
timeline's
This is
exclusive
how
gate
coding
has
gets
a
fucked
higher
up.
priority than the one connected to the bridge down keyframe. So there's no way for the bridge down keyframe to be activated. We need to raise the priority of the second exclusive gate, but only when square is pressed with the right timing. We can achieve this by adding another keyframe that modifies the exclusive gate. Go to the animation menu and select the keyframe. Stamp one onto the third row of the timeline, immediately after the long bridge up keyframe. As soon as you place it, the keyframe will start recording. While it's recording, go into the tweak menu of the exclusive gate connected to the bridge down keyframe. Increase its priority to 12, so it's one higher than the other gate's priority. When you're done, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. So now we have an exclusive gate that is priority 10, but can change to be priority 12. The keyframe is very short at the moment, so hover over it and hold the up directional button until it fills up the end of the timeline. Now open the keyframe tweak menu with L1 and square. Once activated, we need the keyframe's effects to be permanent. So select the Keep Changes option in the tweak menu. Now, once the bridge is down, it'll stay put. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle.
No,
This
it
keyframe will be
it
active
makes
for half a
sense.
second.
it's something simple right now, but it's actually teaching you how
Now,
to do
once
like
the bridge
mini
is down,
games and
it'll
whatnot.
stay
If you want to
put.
do like,
Close the tweak
you know,
menu
an
with
action
L1 and
sequence
circle.
where they have to hit buttons a
This
certain
keyframe
way,
will be active for
you know,
half a second
that would
when the meter is full.
pretty much be
Enough
that.
time to hit square and lower the bridge.
Oh,
But look, there's another wire going from the square button output of the controller sensor. This wire closes the upper gate, preventing players from button mashing to cheat the timing.
yeah. See, that's what I
If you
like about
press
this is
square
they
before
talk
you're
about
supposed to,
how
the
they have it
exclusive gate will close
pre-programmed to
briefly,
avoid
causing the
glitches.
timeline
So hold
to
on, let me
reach
back
cheat
this up a
with
little bit.
effects to be permanent. So select the Keep Changes option in the tweak menu. Now, once the bridge is down, it'll stay put. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle. This keyframe will be active for half a second when the meter is full. Enough time to hit square and lower the bridge. But look, there's another wire going from the square button output of the controller sensor. This wire closes the upper gate, preventing players from button mashing to cheat the timing.
Wait. One more time, what does it do?
The output of the controller sensor with L1 and circle. This keyframe will be active for half a second when the meter is full. Enough time to hit square and lower the bridge. But look, there's another wire going from the square button output of the controller sensor.
Yeah, I noticed.
This wire closes the upper gate, preventing players from button mashing to cheat the timing. If you press square before you're supposed to, the exclusive gate will close briefly, causing the timeline to reset.
See, that's where it gets a little confusing.
There are some crafty players out there in the Dreamiverse, so make sure you haven't left exploits in your logic.
See, like, oh, I love
try
it.
out the scene in play mode.
They literally,
If anything's
like,
going awry,
these,
try following the steps again.
what
to
we're
see where
looking
you
at
went
right
wrong.
now is a visual version of coding. That is literally, they gave us a visual
Once
map
Connie
to
can
code,
reach the
and
final
it's
platform,
amazing.
Breathe a sigh of relief. You've completed this tutorial. You've completed
So, but I don't
Dreamiverse.
quite,
Caught cheat
I'm not
code
quite
of the computer with
comprehending it,
L1
so
and
I want to
circle.
watch this part one more time.
This keyframe will be active for half a
And
second
I see right
when the
here,
meter is full.
like,
Enough time to hit square and lower
so
the bridge.
there's different things.
But look,
Is
there's
dead,
another wire going from the square
possessed,
button output of the controller sensor.
respawn, die, square
This wire
button.
closes the upper gate, preventing players from button mashing to cheat the timing. If
See,
you
I
press
can
square
control
before you're
which
supposed
ones I
to,
want.
The exclusive gate will close briefly, causing the timeline to reset. Causing the cheat the timing.
I need to see the
Cheat
visual.
the output of the control menu with L1 and circle. This keyframe will be active for half a second when the meter is full. Enough time to hit square and lower the bridge. But look,
There is that
there's
problem
another
though
wire
with the
going from the
motion.
square button output of the controller sensor. This wire closes the upper gate, preventing players from button mashing to cheat the timing. If you press square before you're supposed to, the exclusive gate will close briefly, causing the timeline to reset. There are some crafty players out there in the Dreamiverse, so make sure you haven't left exploits in your logic. Time to try out the scene in play mode. If anything's going awry, try following the steps again to see where you went wrong.
Okay, so let me see something. The trigger
Once Connie can reach
is
the final platform,
that.
breathe a sigh of relief. You've completed this tutorial.
Okay, so from the trigger. The not gate, when it's not sending a signal, or when it's not receiving a signal, it's putting out a signal. So if it's not active, this gate's up. She didn't really explain this one. Well, yeah, that's all of this, I guess. So then, bridge up, animation, button, meter full, and then the actual bridge moving down. God damn this! Oh, that's so annoying. Yeah, the motion's fucked up on this. Like, they really need to patch that shit. The drift is ridiculous. That's anytime they have... Yeah, this is a NOT gate. So when there's no signal being sent, then gate input triggered. This is kind of confusing because they didn't actually have us do this one. I don't know. There must be another tutorial that maybe breaks this down a little bit more. Like the actual microchips and stuff. With a controller sensor. Like, what I don't get is how is this gate connected to this? Because I have that open, but yet this is there. Oh no, because exclusive. That's right, because the gates trigger when they're supposed to, and it's the one that has more priority. Okay. Okay. So if it's done, oh, okay. That's why you have this keyframe activating it, because if they activate it in any of this timeline, it goes to this one and reshuts it. But if they get to this keyframe, which is this one, it then prioritizes it, which has to do with them pushing that at the right time. Okay, so weird. So what I don't get is what forces it to reset. What? It's got to be something in the control center. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be coming back to this tutorial and referencing it a lot. No, or the two exclusive ones? Maybe if they're on the same chip, they coincide with each other automatically. That could be it. Oh, this is hard. All right. After that one, y'all, because that was an advanced tutorial. That one messed me up. But that was the last of the logic, aka mechanics. I'm going with like that's like the mechanic tutorial. All right, we're gonna take a little bit of a break, and then I'm literally just gonna go to the BRB screen, and then we're going to listen to some music, and I'm gonna go run to the restroom, and yeah, we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna do character creation next. All right, we'll be right back.
this day forth, you put your faith in me.
Expecto Patronum! Expecto
Shiver me timbers. Yar. Vast ye scallywags. Aye, meaty. Hang him from the yard, Walk the plank. Hang him from the yard, Vast ye scallywags. Walk the plank. Walk the plank.
we go. Part I'm sure everybody's been waiting for.
Connie's hosting a talent contest to find the best characters in the Dreamiverse. Connie's hosting, but she's a no-nonsense judge, and none of these candidates are up to scratch. Of course, Cuthbert's no use, so let's see if we can come up with something to impress her. Head into the dressing room, also known as edit mode, to get started. In this tutorial, we'll be customizing the appearance of a puppet. So we'll need a blank canvas to start. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Gadgets menu. Now open the Gameplay Gear menu. In here, find the blank Puppet Deluxe. The Deluxe version is the perfect starting point for making characters. Select it with X and a blue mannequin will appear on your imp. It has built-in features like jump and possession animations, which the basic version doesn't have. Connie won't be impressed by a basic puppet, so make sure you select the right one. Stamp the deluxe puppet in the scene with R2 or X. Get its feet roughly on the floor, but make sure they aren't intersecting with it. Then press the circle button to unequip the puppet from your imp. If you need to, you can grab and adjust the puppet with R2. In the next step, we'll start exploring the puppets. The puppet might look simple, but it's quite a complex gadget. So let's get to know it a little better. It's made up of many objects that have been grouped together. And just like any other group, it can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. If they're obscured by the floor, you may need to scope out and adjust your puppet's position. The puppet's body is made of sculptures, joined together with connectors.
Oh, and now we're getting into mechanics of... Oh
When
my
scoped
goodness.
in, we can grab parts of the puppet to change its pose. Before we do that, find the button called Puppet Mirror in the context menu. Select this button with X, and your puppet will stay symmetrical when you pose it. Of course, you don't have to make it symmetrical, but it's a good way to start. You can always add nuance later. When you move a part of the puppet, select this button with Puppets. It can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. If they're obscured by the floor, you may need to scope out and adjust your puppet's position. The puppet's body is made of sculptures, joined together with connectors. When scoped in, we can grab parts of the puppet to change its pose. Before we do that, find the button called Puppet Mirror in the context menu. Select this button with X, and your puppet will stay symmetrical when you pose it. Of course, you don't have to make it symmetrical, but it's a good way to start. You can always add nuance later. When you move a part of the puppet, all the parts connected to it will also move. The root of the puppet is the pelvis, and every other part is connected in a hierarchy from there. For example, moving the upper arm will move the lower arm and the hand as well. But if you move the pelvis, the whole puppet will move. Its feet will try to stay in contact with the floor. So if you lower the pelvis, the puppet's knees will bend. You can also rotate parts by grabbing them with L2. Use R2 and L2 to create a new pose for the puppet. Changing the pose can be a great starting point for a character. The pose could be confident, sad, scared, or aggressive. Don't forget, you can undo any changes with the left directional button if you make a mistake. Use the grab cam to adjust your pose from different angles. Just hold R1 over the puppet to activate it. When you've finished posing your puppet, move on to the next step. Now we've posed our puppet, we can start adjusting its proportions. To do that, we're going to use the stretch tool. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the Stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The Stretch tool works like the Move tool in a lot of ways. But with the Stretch tool, you can move parts of the puppet beyond the limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Notice the way the neck elongates and shortens. Now try it on the hands. This changes the length of the upper and lower arm. Some body parts respond differently to the Stretch tool. For instance, if you move the upper arms, the shoulders will broaden and the chest will expand. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons.
Wait, how did you do that one?
I don't think does go on differently to the Stretch tool. For instance, if you move the upper arms, the shoulders will broaden and the chest will expand. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons. I'd only recommend doing this to the puppet's extremities though, the head, hands and feet. Puppets are delicate contraptions, and extreme scaling and stretching can make them behave unexpectedly. But if anything does go skew with, just undo it using the left directional button. If you know how to use sculpt mode, you could try scoping into the individual body parts to change their shape. You can find a whole tutorial on sculpting in the art tutorials. Have a play around with stretching and scaling and see what you can create. Try making the puppet more cartoony or turn it into a monster.
Yep, I went with the monster thing.
Test out your puppet in play mode to see it in motion. When you're done, return to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in
It took its
position.
pose. It takes its pose when I stop
In the
moving.
Next step, I'll show
That's
you
cool.
how to color and stylize your puppet. Another way of customizing your puppet's appearance is by changing its color. We can do this by tinting it in coat mode. If you've played my tutorial on coat, style and effects, you'll already know how to do this. In the assembly menu, go to the modes menu and enter coat mode. In the coat mode menu, open the colors menu and select a color for your puppet. Now hover over your puppet and hold R2 to tint it with your selected color. The longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint will become. If you want your puppet to be multicolored, simply scope into the puppet. Select a different color from the colors menu. Hover your imp over a part of the puppet you want to tint. How about the head? Now, when you press and hold R2, just that part of the puppet will be tinted. You can also use the tools in style mode and effects mode. Try using style mode to change the texture of your puppet. If you don't know how to use style mode, there's an art tutorial which can help you. In the next step, we'll dive into the dressing up box. One of the simplest ways to customize a puppet is by adding accessories. But to make sure they move with the puppet, we need to group them with a body part. Before we do that, it's important to fully understand the concept of scoping in and out of groups and objects. If you've played part 4 of the Start Dreaming tutorials, then you'll already know a thing or two about using groups. Objects in dreams are often combined into groups, which can be treated like a single object in assembly mode. Groups themselves can also be grouped. This means that you can have groups nested inside other groups. Let's try scoping in and out of something else before we invade the puppet's personal space. Over there on the floor is a hat box. Make sure you're in edit mode. Now try taking the lid off the hat box. The whole box will move because the lid, the box, and its contents have been grouped. Undo the move with the left directional button to put it back in its place. Now scope into the group. Hover over the hat box, press and hold L1 and press X. Everything but the box should go grey and blurry. If not, make sure your visual feedback preference is set to all. This shows that you've... One of the simplest ways to customize a puppet is by adding accessories. Objects. Over there on the floor is a hat box. Make sure you're in edit mode. Now try taking the lid off the hat. Should go grey and blur. Undo the move with the left directional button to put it back in its place. Now scope into the group. Hover over the hat box, press and hold L1 and press X. Everything but the box should go grey and blurry. If not, make sure your visual feedback preference is set to all. This shows that you've scoped into the group and can edit its contents. Now, you should be able to take the lid off the hat box. Inside is another hat box. Try taking the lid off this one. I think you can guess what will happen. This smaller hat box is also grouped with its lid and contents. Remove the smaller box and place it next to the large one. Now scope into this group by holding L1 and pressing X over the smaller hat box. The original hat box will go grey and blurry as we've scoped into a subgroup. Now you should be able to open the smaller hat box. What's inside? A lovely hat. Take it out and place it next to the smaller box. When you've done that, proceed to the next step. Now that we've taken the hat out of the box, let's try putting it on our puppet. First, we need to scope out of this group. To do that, simply hold L1 and press circle. That takes us back into the large hat box group. Now scope out again into the main scene by holding L1 and pressing circle. Pick up the hat. We seem to have a bit of a problem here. The hat is still inside the nested groups, even though it's outside the hat box. When you scope in and out, only you and your imp are moving in and out of objects or groups. Unless you're carrying something with you. Scope back into the large hat box group, and then into the smaller hat box group to get the hat. Now grab and hold the hat with R2, and scope out of both groups with L1 and circle while holding the hat. If you've done it correctly, you should be back in the main scene. With a hat you can now move independently of the boxes. That's because scoping in and out of a group whilst holding an object adds or removes it from that group. Hurrah! Now we can put it on the puppet. Grab the hat, hover over the puppet, then hold L1 and press X to scope into the puppet with the hat. Now scope into the puppet's head while still holding the hat. This is a shortcut for grouping two objects if you're already grabbing one of them. Simply grab an object and scope into another object to group them automatically without having to select them. The same way that scoping into a group while holding an object adds it to the group. Now that it's in a group with the head, place the hat where you want it. Remember to check it from different angles using the grab cam to make sure it's in position. Press R2 softly to nudge if you need to make fine adjustments to the position of the hat. Before you move on, you should try out the puppet to see it walk around with its new accessory. Switch to play mode, possess it with R2, and take it for a wander. Nice. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Going to play mode and back to edit mode will scope you out of any groups. Remember to rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. Then go to the next step. Okay, let's add some more accessories before our puppet's stage debut. Open the assembly menu and select Search, the button with the magnifying glass, to search for an element. Usually, you'd be in the Dreamiverse here, but for this tutorial, I've kept things simple and curated a collection of elements for you to use. Take a look at some of the accessories in the collection. Select one you like with X. You'll now have your chosen accessory on your imp. Don't stamp it down yet though. First we need to scope into the puppet. You can do this even when you have an element from the Dreamiverse on your imp. Scope in with L1 and X, and then scope into the body part that you want to attach it to. If that body part is already in its own group, you'll enter that group. But if the body part is just a sculpture, then you'll create a new group when you stamp the object down. Once the accessory is in the group, you can adjust the accessory while you're there. Try adding some more accessories from the collection. Then it's important to test the puppet in play mode to check that the accessory is attached correctly. Here's another very important tip. If you ever want to remove an accessory, whatever you do, don't ungroup the body part. If you do that, you'll delete that group's connection to the puppet. And without the connector, your puppet's limbs will start falling off when you go into play mode. And nobody wants that. Only one object. Here's another very important tip. If you ever want to remove an accessory, whatever you do, don't ungroup the body part. If you do that, you'll delete that group's connection to the puppet. And without the connector, your puppet's limbs will start falling off when you go into play mode. And nobody wants that. Instead, scope into the group containing the body part and the accessory. Then either delete the accessory or grab it and scope out. If there's only one object left in the group, it'll automatically ungroup, and the connector will remain safely connected to the remaining object. Play around with the things you've learned in this tutorial and have fun making a character. When you're happy, select the star podium from the tutorial collection and stamp it down in the outline that we've put in the scene for you. Then head back into play mode, jump onto the podium and see what Connie thinks of your creation.
Yep, looks good. I missed the whole podium part. I gotta make a podium.
So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. Over the bridge, from the Shapes menu, and select what color you want it to be. Bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one. Oh dear, it looks like Cuthbert is really stuck this time. In previous tutorials, you've edited the scene to help Connie reach Cuthbert. But this time, you'll be editing Connie herself, supercharging her with some new abilities to get past the obstacles in the scene. Bear in mind that this is a complex tutorial in which it's easy to make a mistake. If you do, remember to use the left directional button to undo. Now go into play mode and see how far you can get. Possess Connie with R2 and press the X button to jump. What you need to do is tweak her. So hover over her, hold L1 and press the square button to open her tweak menu. This is a puppet tweak menu. As you can see, it's jam-packed with different options. Thankfully, the setting we want is on the first page. All these settings control Connie's overall movement. We could make Connie run super fast or super slow. But nah, that's not gonna help her. A nice high jump is what we need. What do we have here? This slider controls Connie's jump height. Hover over it with your imp and hold X to grab it. Move your imp to adjust the slider to around 3 meters. That should be enough to get over that stack of blocks. The Puppet Tweak menu also has some really useful testing controls. Click R3 to start time, and Connie will come to life. See what happens now if you hover your imp over the jump height slider. You can preview the jump, so you can get it to the perfect height without having to test it in play mode. Actually, I think you should dial it back to 2.5 meters, or she might overshoot the jump. You can make small adjustments to sliders by using the up and down directional buttons. Hover over the slider and use the down directional button to adjust the setting. Feel free to explore some of the other settings in the menu. If you're not sure what a button or slider does, just hover over it for a few seconds and a more info tip will pop up to explain. You can even adjust the strength of gravity on her jump. Turn it down a bit to make her jump more floaty. When you've got Connie's jump the way you want it, give it a test run in play mode. See how far Connie can get now, then move on to the next step when you're ready to continue. Well, that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, Connie's new jumping skills aren't going to be much use on the next obstacle. And don't even think about making her jump over the top, because that force field will zap her in a second. Instead, let's give Connie the power to crouch. I bet she's always dreamed of it. If you're still in play mode, switch back to edit mode now. Rewind time with L3 to put Connie back at the start. To give her a crouch, we need to scope into her. Puppets are made up of sculptures, connectors, and gadgets that are grouped together. Hover over Connie, press and hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you've scoped into a puppet, you can see its inner workings. On Connie's back, there's a microchip gadget. It's called Connie's brain, and it contains all her logic and animations. Let's take a look inside. Hold L1 and press X over it to scope in and open the microchip canvas. There's quite a lot going on in here. The gadget I want you to look at is this one in the bottom right corner with the diamond icon. This is a keyframe gadget. If you've played through the keyframes and timelines tutorial, you'll already know all about
I have not
these.
done that one yet.
Keyframes record changes to things in the scene. They store those changes in a gadget, which can be triggered using logic. This keyframe contains a crouching pose for Connie. Select the keyframe with X, and you'll see a preview of how it looks. Those dashed lines over Connie show that she's being changed by the keyframe. Press circle to deselect the keyframe, and she goes back to normal. To be able to activate the crouch keyframe, we need to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. Then you'll be able to make her crouch with a controller button. In the next step, I'll show you how to do exactly that. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu stay to the left. This is because they generate signals, and signals flow through gadgets from left to right in Dreams. You can also save the 3D space position of tweak menus and microchips, or pin them to the screen, using the buttons that appear at the top when hovering over the canvas. This will help you keep them tidy while you're editing logic, which is very important as it's easy to make mistakes. Now, let's take a closer look at that controller sensor. Ah, look, controller buttons. Just what we need. All playable characters contain a controller sensor gadget like this one. But the gadget can also be used for any situation where you want to detect button presses. To assign our keyframe to a button, we just need to wire it to the controller sensor. We won't use a circle button as that depossesses Connie, and X makes her jump. So how about the square button to crouch? Make sure you can see the keyframe on the microchip. Move the tweak menu with R2 if you need to. If you hover over the square button in the controller sensor menu, you'll see ports appear on either side of it. They're just like the ports you see on gadgets. Ports on the left are inputs, and ports on the right are outputs. Now, you need to be very precise for the next part, as it's easy to make a mistake. Carefully hover your imp over the output port of the square button, and press X to create a wire. Stretch that wire over to the keyframe, and connect it to the power port on the bottom of the gadget with X. If at any time you make a mistake, Just undo it using the left directional button. Once your crouch move is all wired up, close the controller sensor tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1, then press circle to close. Now try out Connie's new crouch in play mode. See if she can make it under the second obstacle. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and start the next step. Right, we're on to the final obstacle. There's no way around it, but it looks destructible. So we're gonna make a slam attack for Connie so that she can smash through it. We'll start by recording a pose for the slam. We can do this using a keyframe. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my keyframes and timelines tutorial, you'll have a bit of a head start on this next part. Go to the assembly menu and open the animate menu. Select the keyframe with X. You'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and color. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Because we're scoped in, this opens the tweak menu for the sculpture itself, rather than the puppet. All the settings on this page change the way Connie's cone looks. Look for the glow slider on the first page. Its icon is a sun. Raise the glow up to about 40%. Once you've set the glow, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview it to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview what's been recorded. Looks good. Deselect the keyframe by pressing circle. In the next step, we'll continue building Connie's slam attack. The next step is to place our new Connie animation into a timeline. Using a timeline will let us time the animations and effects of the slam attack. Go to the assembly menu and back to the animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp a timeline above the crouch keyframe. Now let's open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas. Double feel snappy. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas with X. Move your imp to shorten the timeline to 1 second. Make sure you don't select the trim button by mistake. It's a square button by the numbers at the top of the timeline. It has a black arrow on it. The timeline duration is now correct, but the space is very small. So let's zoom in a bit. Hover your imp over the timeline canvas, hold L1 and press the right directional button to zoom in. This will keep the timeline duration to 1 second long, but stretch the space so that you can fit more detail into it. If you need to zoom out, just hold L1 and press the left directional button. Now let's put our slam attack keyframe onto the timeline. Grab the keyframe with R2 and place it at the start of the timeline canvas. Make sure you've got the slam keyframe and not the crouch one. The gadget automatically snaps to the surface of the canvas. The keyframe is only a fraction of a second long at the moment, but we need it to fill the length of the timeline. So hover over the keyframe and hold the up directional button to scale it. Make it the same length as the timeline. Now we want to wire the timeline up to a button press, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's slam
missed that
attack
last part.
impact button. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the slam attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's slam attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add some force to it. When you're ready to continue, return to edit mode, rewind time, and start the next step. The slam attack animation is all set up, but it's not doing much besides looking cool. So we need to add a gadget to our timeline that will emit a force when Connie slams the ground. The gadget we're going to use for this is the force applier. Go to the assembly menu and open the gadgets menu. Find the move as an output menu and open it with X. The icon for the force applier looks like a gust of wind. Select it with X to equip it to your imp. I hope you've still got the timeline open. If not, open it with L1 and X. Stamp the force applier onto the timeline canvas below the keyframe. Press circle to unequip the force applier from your imp. The force applier isn't very strong by default, so we'll need to tweak it. To open its tweak menu, hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square. At the top of the tweak menu is the force
I mean, shit, they're
strength
just
slider.
asking to make
Its
a
icon
Star Wars
is
game
a
here.
beefy arm. Drag it all the way up to 100% using your imp. That will ensure the force emitted will overcome the gravity in the scene and the friction between the blocks. Next, increase the force speed to 10 meters per second. That will give the slam attack some punch. If you take a look at Connie, you'll see a green zone around her. Anything in this zone will be affected by the force applier. At the moment, the zone isn't much bigger than Connie. Hover your imp over the zone and arrow gizmos will appear. Grab them with R2 and move your imp to change the size of the zone.
Oh, this is
Or
making me want to make
you
a
can
Dragon Ball
scale
Z
the
game
zone
now.
more
No,
precisely
fucking,
in the
I don't know.
force
So
applier
many
tweak
games are
menu.
starting to pop into my head.
Go to the tab called Zone Size.
Oh,
Grab the zone size slider with X and set it to about 3.5 meters. Okay, let's test out Connie's new powers. Switch over to play mode. Possess Connie and give her new slam attack a try. Oops! Looks like it's more power than Connie can handle. The force applier is pushing her off the platform. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time.
ah! This is awesome.
In the final step, I'll show you how to tweak the force applier so that it only affects the objects we want it to.
I can fly. Are you kidding? You taught me the flying mechanic. This is perfect. I mean, we'll have to tweak things a little bit. But I can fly. I love that they do that. They purposely make you glitch out.
To prevent the force applier from pushing Connie off the platforms, we're going to use labels. Labels can be given to any object in the scene, and gadgets like the force applier can detect them. In the force applier tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. Hover over the friend button and press X to deselect it. It's the button with the heart icon. Now Connie should be able to blast through the blocks without firing herself off into space. Use her new skills to pass all the obstacles. And you can use your new skills to create some characters for your scenes. When you've successfully rescued Cuthbert, go through the door to finish this tutorial. You might be able to animate wobbly platforms with the action recorder, but keyframes are where animation gets serious. Nice try, Cuthbert, but leave the dream shaping to the experts. We're going to use keyframes to animate the platform so Connie can reach the exit. A keyframe records any changes you make to an object, such as its position, tweak menu settings, or anything else you can think of. Then it stores those changes in a gadget that you can switch on and off. Okay, let's use keyframes to help Connie get across those platforms. First, go to the assembly menu. If it's closed, press the square button to open it. Look for the Animate button, which has a clapperboard icon, and click on that. Start by selecting the keyframe gadget, which is the one with the diamond and the plus sign. Then stamp it in the scene above the first gap. You'll notice there's now a Stop Recording button in the context menu, and your imp now looks like a red keyframe. That means the keyframe gadget is recording any changes you make in the scene. But unlike the action recorder, it only records the state of things, not a period of time. It's probably easier to understand if we put it into practice. Let's try it on the block that's on the ground in front of Connie.
I actually was really good
Grab
at
it
this in
with
school.
R2
I know
and place it
exactly what
between
he's
the
talking
first
about.
two platforms. You'll see some dashed lines appear on the block. These tell you that the keyframe has recorded the change you've made to the object. You can move it as many times as you like. It'll only store the final result. If that's not the outcome you wanted, you can always undo your last change with the left directional button. The next bit is super important. To finish and store your changes in the keyframe, you need to select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Select it now and see what happens. That's right. The block has snapped back to its original position. That's because the keyframe isn't active right now. But we can still see what's recorded by selecting the gadget with X. There, the block is back to where you moved it. You'll notice the keyframe doesn't record how things moved, just where they moved to. Make sure you
You're
deselect the
adorable.
keyframe before moving on. You can do that by pressing the circle button. In the next step, I'll show you how to use your keyframe in the scene. Now that you've recorded a keyframe, let's look at how to activate it. See the trigger zone above the first platform? Select it with X to check its area of effect. Okay, it looks like the zone stretches across the whole gap. Now that you've recorded a keyframe, let's look at how to activate it. See the trigger zone above the first platform? Select it with X to check its area of effect. Okay, it looks like the zone stretches across the whole gap. Deselect it with the circle button. Then use the sticks or the grab cam to move in closer to the gadget. You'll notice an output port on its side, labeled Detected. This sends a signal when it detects a possessed puppet like Connie. We need to connect this to the keyframe, so select the port with R2 or X to create a wire. Then stretch it to the keyframe gadget with your imp and use R2 or X to connect the wire to the power port. Now the trigger zone's signal will switch on the keyframe when it detects Connie.
Is it feeding time? I don't think it is. I swear I just fed you.
the plank.
Try it out in play mode. Just press the options button and select the controller icon. See? As soon as Connie enters the trigger zone area, the block springs into place. Well, it works okay, but the animation's a bit fast, don't you think? We can do something about that after you take Connie across. Head back into edit mode, rewind time with L3, and I'll show you how to add smoothing to the keyframe in the next step. Okay then, we've made a simple keyframe animation. Now it's time to smooth it out and make it look better. Like almost everything in Dreams, keyframes can be tweaked. So open this one's tweak menu, hold L1, then press the square button over it. You'll see two sliders at the bottom, slow power up and slow power down. These determine how long it takes for the keyframe to turn on fully. Hover over the slow power up slider now and hold X. Then move your imp to the right to increase the value. Let's set it to 1 second for now. You can set slow power down to any value you like. Then close the tweak menu by selecting the cross icon in the corner. Or you can hold L1 over the menu, then press the circle button. Let's see what that looks like in play mode. Ah yes, that looks a lot smoother. If you're happy with the new animation, switch back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. It looks like the bridge across the next gap has collapsed. We could just move it back into place, but where's the fun in that? Let's perform a little bit of magic instead. Go to the Assembly menu and select another keyframe from the Animate menu. Stamp it above the gap with R2 or X. Now see if you can reassemble the bridge. Grab the first part and move it back where it should be. One of the great things about keyframes is that they can affect multiple objects. So you can put the other half of the bridge back too. Then select Stop Recording from the Context menu to store your changes. Once recording stops, the bridge will go back to its original position. So, select the keyframe with X if you want to see those changes again. I could have done a better job at positioning the bridge. Nothing to worry about though, because editing a keyframe is easy. Just select the Edit Keyframe button in the Context menu. It's got the same icon as a keyframe gadget. This allows you to make changes to the keyframe. You can remove things from a keyframe by pressing the triangle button over them. And now the bridges are back on the ground. Let's put them back into place, but this time, make sure they're a bit straighter. Remember, when you're grabbing things, you can realign them by pressing the triangle button. There we go, much better. You can select Stop Recording again to finish editing this keyframe. Then move on to the next step when your bridge is in place. The bridge's new position is already stored in the keyframe, so all we need now is a way to activate it. That's where this trigger zone will come in handy. Let's select it to see what zone it covers. It's not in the gap this time, it's over this button. First, create a wire from the trigger zone's output using R2 or X. Then stretch it over to the keyframe and connect it to its power port. When Connie steps on the button now, the keyframe will be switched on. But what happens when she leaves the trigger zone? Let's test it in play mode to find out. The keyframe just moved the trigger zone into the gap. The keyframe switches off. Let's head back to edit mode and see what we can do about that. Of course, we could just move the trigger zone into the gap, but this is an animation tutorial. So let's see if we can use the keyframe's tweak menu to fix the problem. Open it now with the L1 and square button shortcut and have a look at the options there. Hovering over the buttons will bring up their names. The one we're interested in is called Keep Changes. With this option turned on, any changes made by the animation will be permanent. So once Connie activates the keyframe, the bridge will stay in its new position until you rewind the scene. Since we're already in the tweak menu, let's add some smoothing to that animation. I think I'll set it to 2 seconds this time. Okay, time to close the tweak menu with L1 and the circle button. Then try out these changes in play mode. How's that for a magic trick? You can switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and experiment with the keyframe to see what else you can do. Maybe you could try keyframing a tweak menu setting, or animating some elements from the tutorial collection. When you're done, move on to the next step, and I'll show you how to use keyframes on a timeline. You can switch. It looks like the kid just moved the triggers. Hot with this activates the key. Let's add. Okay. You can switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and experiment with the keyframe to see what else you can do. Maybe you could try keyframing a tweak menu setting, or animating some elements from the tutorial collection. When you're done, move on to the next step, and I'll show you how to use keyframes on a timeline. Keyframes are great for making simple animations. But if you want to make something more complex, you need a timeline. See that little block floating between the last two platforms? Let's use keyframes on a timeline to animate it. Start by selecting a timeline from the Animate menu. Stamp it down somewhere around the last gap. Then you can use the circle button to unequip the gadget. Now open the timeline, hold L1 over it, and press X. This is the timeline canvas. You can move the canvas with your imp by grabbing it with R2. The numbers along the top are seconds, and you can see it set to 8 seconds by default. If you grab the edges with X, you can extend or shorten the canvas. Try setting it to around 6 seconds. If you ever need extra space to add more things, you can also extend the bottom of the timeline. Once you're comfortable with moving and resizing the timeline canvas, move on to the next step and we'll start adding things to it. Now, it's time to animate the floating block. Get a new keyframe from the Animate menu and stamp it in the scene. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Now, let's wait. Now grab and move the block to its starting position at the edge of the platform where Cuthbert's waiting. Once the block's in place, remember to press the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Now, grab the keyframe gadget and move it over the timeline. The gadget will snap to it. Place it at the very start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. Move the floating block to the opposite side of the gap. Now stop recording. Hover over the timeline canvas and play controls will appear. Using these controls, you can preview just the timeline without playing the rest of the scene. Select the play button to preview your animation. As you can see, gadgets are only active when the timeline's playhead is over them. So, when neither of the keyframes are switched on, the block goes right back to its original position. Now we need to edit the animation so the first keyframe blends into the second. To do that, open the first keyframe's tweak menu with L1 and the square button. Now that the keyframe is on a timeline, the buttons that were grayed out before are available. These are blend types, and they change how one keyframe merges into the next. Select the linear button, which will blend to the next keyframe at a constant speed. If you press the timeline's play, it will blend to the next key second mark. This start of the timeline. Then get another keyframe from the Animate menu. We'll use this one to record the block's second position. This time, stamp the keyframe directly onto the timeline. Around the 2-second mark is good, on the same row as the first keyframe. Move the floating block to the opposite side of the gap. Now stop recording. Hover over the timeline canvas and play controls will appear. Using these controls, you can preview just the timeline without playing the rest of the scene. Select the play button to preview your animation. As you can see, gadgets are only active when the timeline's playhead is over them. So, when neither of the keyframes are switched on, the block goes right back to its original position. Now we need to edit the animation so the first keyframe blends into the second. To do that, open the first keyframe's tweak menu with L1 and the square button. Now that the keyframe is on a timeline, the buttons that were grayed out before are available. These are blend types, and they change how one keyframe merges into the next. Select the linear button, which will blend to the next keyframe at a constant speed. If you press the timeline's play button now, you'll see the platform move smoothly between the keyframed positions. Feel free to try out other blend types and see how they affect the animation. Then move on to the next step when you're ready. We've got the platform moving smoothly now, but we can still improve how it works. Let's begin by making it pause for a moment at the start and finish, so Connie has an easier time getting on. All we have to do is scale the keyframes on the timeline, so they last longer. You might want to get up close to the first key before we start.